with that, tonight we're going to welcome Adam Jacobson. He reached out to me to do a talk, which is great. Again, anybody who's on tonight, if you want to reach out to me and do a talk, or you know somebody that would like to do a talk, let me know. We can bring them in. We can get some really interesting information. And Adam's going to talk about, I'm going to say, not SQL stuff, but he's going to show us how to get around things like OData, APIs, working with JSON, working with REST APIs. He's going to go through and discuss what those things are, why they're important, some of the challenges with them. And I think the key thing that I like is he talks about with the advent of SaaS, S-A-A-S, which is software as a service, everything moving to the cloud, we're not working with databases as much anymore in the cloud. So learning how to wield these tools, especially in PowerShell, become a really good thing to put in the tool belt and really ups your skills. So Adam, thanks for joining us. And if you're ready to go.
I am ready to go.
I'll stop
share my screen.
Great.
Did I share my screen?
Hold
on.
Nope.
Hold on. What just happened here? Okay, let's go share screen. There we go.
All right.
Okay, there we go. Okay, cool.
Excellent. So just as another note before we kick off, if anybody in the chat room, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and I'll call you out and you can actually, I'll unmute you and you can ask a question, or you can just type your question in the chat and then we'll pose that to Adam. Okay.
Okay,
Adam,
hold on a second. It always does this.
Okay.
It's just, I want to make sure it's, when you go into PowerShell, it spreads it, when you go into PowerPoint, it spreads it across two screens.
Gotcha.
And it messes it up. So it's gone.
No problem. Take your
I'll
time.
just say duplicate, and I can do this is bizarre. Do you see my screen with the
Yes,
PowerShell PowerPoint? Okay.
I see the PowerPoint. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Data without a database. When you can't start with SQL, let me just introduce. I'm Adam Jacobson. Basically, a lot of what I do recently, a lot of data for Dynamics, Nav, and Business Central, plus some other things. A lot of SQL, some DAX, PowerShell. I do a lot of complex accounting. The reason I got into PowerShell, it was the best way I could find to load data easily into SQL. I am not a good pretty visual person here. A friend once said to me that if you want to watch me sweat, make me create a Visio flowchart. I do not like Visio. I do not like anything that requires me to make a document like that. Why I love self-service BI. So in the agenda, I'm going to start with an admission of this, some tools we're going to talk about. Then the three major parts of this, right, are APIs, JSON, and PowerShell. Now, let me just start by saying, why is this important? I mean, Doug touched on it a little bit, but I will tell you a story that Ultimate Payroll is like $1 billion payroll company or something. They just merged with Kronos. So one of my clients has this payroll, and I was dealing with some reporting issues. They give you a Cognos front end, and there were some issues that things weren't making sense here. And you know, the only way I get the data is an API. And then I was almost moved to tears because I was on the phone with the support about this problem. They acknowledged that indeed I'd found an issue, but they had SQL Server Management Studio in front of them, and all I had was the API in Cognos. So I was really, really upset. But this is the nature of the universe right now, that folks are buying software as a service. On-prem software still has a place, but it's just declining, and therefore where I always had SQL, and sometimes that SQL was AS400 SQL, and sometimes that SQL was Oracle SQL, but there was always a database one could pull from. And now that's not the truth anymore, because with software as a service, you know, many times, not all the time, but many times, the only way you get to your data is by using one of these APIs. So that's what this is about here. And that this especially becomes problematic when you've got 5 or 6 cloud systems, because then you wind up bringing all that data back into some central repository, which could be SQL Server Managed Instance, but you're kind of pulling all that data together and you've got to get all these APIs working. An admission, you know, when I gave this, I have often presented at software-specific forums. So for example, like in Dynamics Business Central, it used to be GP, I've done something called Lawson. I tried to find free examples that demonstrate everything I wanted to show in PowerShell. I couldn't quite get there. So the examples work with common, but some examples work with common but paid business software like Business Central, Ultimate Payroll. As I say, unfortunately, for those of you from the SQL world, there is no AdventureWorks REST API that I know of. But as Doug pointed, we were talking about this. The reason it's good that there's no central thing here is that one rule about this standard is there is no standard. Yeah, there's some basic things in common across APIs, but how folks structure their JSON, how they choose for you to do authentication, what comes back in various pieces, you know, every different software you pull up, there's something else you have to learn. So it's far different than, oh my God, just give me a connection string and I'm good to go. You'll notice one thing that's totally missing in my list of qualifications, web developer. You know, a lot of these APIs, you're essentially doing web calls. And there are times that as someone who doesn't really want to be a web developer and will not be a web developer, there are times I kind of have this feeling that I'm 90% of knowing what I want to know, but you know, that's where I am. So, okay. One of the challenges of using this stuff, of learning APIs, is that if like me, you did a lot of work in SQL Server Management Studio or maybe Visual Studio, you could spend your day working with one application. And that's not the case with APIs. Postman is a tool I'm going to show quite a bit of, obviously PowerShell, Visual Studio Code, Notepad++. This is more of an issue, again, for folks who are pure database people and they got to learn all these different things, but that's where we go. One thing I would like to point out that please, you are encouraged to put things in the chat. It's a challenge talking to a screen for an hour. I've done this several times now in our new universe, but please ask questions. It just makes me feel that someone is out there. Okay.
Okay, I got a question.
Yes.
Why two editors? Visual Studio Code and Notepad++.
Only because you could probably use probably because I got used to PowerShell and Visual Studio Code, and I like Notepad++ because I found a really nice add. I only use Notepad++ as a nice way to look at JSON. Right? Cool. Makes sense. So it's just a really nice plugin that you click a button and the JSON formats nicely.
Great.
And it's a nice, so that's really all I use it for. And you know, so
great.
So again, just to make really level set here, API just stands for Application Program Interface. If you're like me and you've worked in the business software world for a long time, we always had APIs. Like, and the basic thing, everybody needs to load journal entries into their ledger system, right? From payroll, or whatever it happens to be. Or they have a warehouse management system which talks to the inventory system. So APIs are just ways that we can copy data between systems and move data between systems without someone rekeying them. A web service is just kind of an API that moved to the cloud. So rather than calling an on-premise thing, it goes to the web. REST stands for representational or representation state transfer. Not really important. I mean, for our purposes, again, not web developers, they do follow certain standards about how the things work. So that's useful. OData is just a way of that those REST APIs are created. JSON, which we'll get into more in section 2, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Now, key thing to know, you don't have to know anything about JavaScript to do this. I mean, I've had one encounter with JavaScript, and it was one of the worst days of my life, and I haven't gone back, and I do not intend to ever go back to JavaScript, ever. But this is just for all those folks who hated XML, you can now hate JavaScript. Now you can hate JSON. So same way, it's just a way of formatting data that's consumable by multiple things in a standard, and you'll see what that looks like. I'll spend quite a bit of time explaining JSON or showing examples of JSON because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay, let's get into the API section of it. So if you think about a basic API, okay, every API has certain pieces to it. The first thing is called a method. Now, we're going to focus entirely on get methods today, because if it's hard to do a select based on generic things here, doing real post examples is really, really specific to the software you're doing, so I'm not doing that. So get means it's essentially a selecting data, right? Post means I'm inserting data to something here. The other one I use, delete, deletes data, and either put or patch, depending on the situation, will adjust your data. Headers, okay? So headers are just metadata about what you're sending. You'll see two key things of headers: content type, telling you what the content you want back will be. Authentication, how you validate this, is often in the header, although you'll see not always. The next piece is the query string, which is kind of the URI or URL that you're used to seeing on your web pages. That's what you can actually send out as your command that will be processed by your API. The body is what you get back for gets. It is what you send when you do a post. So if I'm asking for weather data, the body will have that generally JSON formatted weather information, but the temperatures and such like that. Okay, this is the kind of high level pieces you have to do. They're broken down a little bit further in PowerShell, but for right now, think about the method you want, the headers you're having, the query you're creating, and the body that you expect to get back. Okay, but as with anything, I'm going to spend a lot of time in examples because that's really where things work better here. The first two guys are free. One is called Openweathermap.org. It's free up to like several thousand, requests a month here. Then it becomes paid if you actually want to put it as an app on that one here. Fixer.io is a currency one that was really easy to learn. Business Central is these are paid. Microsoft, you can actually get a free version of Business Central for 30 days. I don't think you want to do that unless you're an accountant or you actually know something about accounting software. Business Central, I'm going to use that because it gives me the data I want to play with. Ultimate Time and Attendance is another paid software, which I'm going to be showing examples from. Okay, so these are some basics I'm working with. Okay, so let's start off with openweathermap.org. So just for you guys should know, if you ever want to set up APIs, and you can look these up here. So I have created, so I'm just going to show you the web page Openweathermap. Okay, let me just sign in. Hold on, I hate when that happens. Okay. And again, you can create a free account on this guy here, except that I don't know, it memorized the wrong thing. I got to fix that. Okay. So this one is a really simple thing. The first thing you have to do is get an API key. So in this case, you'll be using this key to actually send requests into the system. Okay. So once we have that key, then the query itself is very, very simple. So let's look at, so if we look back here, we can look in the PowerShell, in the PowerPoint. This is actually the key, this is the API we're doing. We're calling API.openweathermap.org, and we're asking for the weather in London that's one parameter I'm passing, plus the app ID is that key that I want to do here. So this is really simple because the validation is happening right in, the validation is happening just with that key in the query itself. There's no other authentication. So if I go in here and I've saved my URL here, so I can just do this here, you'll see here's my URL, right? I just put the exact same thing in here. I have an API, it's asking for London, and it's passing my app ID, okay? Really pretty simple here. And what's coming back here is JSON. Now, it's not formatted very well. You could actually cut and paste this and put this into Notepad if you wanted to. But right now, I just want to show you that almost any API you can post into, you can cut and paste into a browser and see if you can get it to work, especially with very simple APIs like this one. Okay, but running things through browsers isn't the most efficient way of doing things here. So this is where Postman comes in. So Postman you can download by going to getpostman.com. Okay, so let's get this all out of here. Okay, I don't want to see waiting room. How is that? Fine, good, thanks. Okay, so let's look at how the API works in Postman. So Postman says we can create an API, right? And Postman has some good documentation. I don't want to dwell too much on this one. So here's my fundamental API here. I told it I wanted to do a get. I want to do a get. Here's what I want to call. Now, in here, I can specify parameters which go after the question mark in the base API here, right? So we have the base API, and then I have the parameters I want to do that call in the URL, in the basic query. So the first parameter is called Q, which is what they just want to hear here, and you can specify the name of the city for this particular one here. Then they want what they call app ID, and that's the special code that I got when I set up my account, right? If I click send, you can see down here in JSON that is actually got the data back for me that I have the weather in London. And let's see if we can, the temperature, I'm not sure why these are saying, why that's 289 degrees doesn't seem to make a lot of sense here. So I'm not sure what data I'm actually getting here. I looked, it made more sense when I did this the last time. Let's see if it works better if I do it again. I don't know why that's 285.93 temperature. Okay, in any case, I have a simple API. Postman allows me to put in my query parameters. So for example, just in Postman, I could change this to New York. It changes, it uses the parameter, it changes it right here, and I can click send. And then it doesn't work. Oh, because it's New York. I think that works. Which one did I do? There we go. I'm still getting London. I don't know why. That's interesting. I don't know. Okay. So, oh no, here it is, New York. So I've got New York. And I don't know if any of this data is right. Wind speed 5 degrees. I don't know what these, oh, these are, I know what these are. These are Kelvin. Are these Kelvin? 273. Yes, that would make sense as Kelvin. So minus 273 degrees to absolute zero. That tells you it's 24 degrees Celsius, 25 degrees Celsius, which is what it about is in New York right now. So you can see that data here. Now, again, the advantage of using Postman is you can do all this playing around and testing and watching your response, which is a lot easier than trying to do this in PowerShell. The other thing you can do is you can go here and click Save Response, and you can save that to a file. I've already saved it to a file. It will save that as JSON, and we can save our results right there. Okay. Now, this is a really, really simple example. Here's another simple example of, this one is using the fixer one. Now, one thing I want to teach you about Postman is that while in the last one I had everything explicitly written out, like we saw the previous one here, it's explicitly telling me everything in here. I can also in Postman create variables. Now, why is that useful? Because if I am, for example, running 4 or 5 APIs from the same basic source here, and the access key changes, I don't want to have to go into every API that I'm testing to change the access key. So within what's called the Postman collection, I can go into here and say edit, and I have variables set up here, and I can specify my access key variable here, and that's used anytime I specify the variable within Postman. So it's really easy to test. In this case, for example, I'm asking for it to convert currency from USD to euros for 25 euros. I click send, and we see we have a very simple response back here, which shows me the rate and gives me the result of 21 euros. Okay, so this is all pretty good for basic information. I want to show you a little, so you see these are all very limited amounts of data here. I want to show you a little more complex guy that works with the Business Central. So in this case here, so we still have, so in the previous case, we had, in this case, we don't have parameters here. What we do have though is authorization, right? In the previous example, and this password can automatically, I will change that easily. In this example, they require that you authorize with a username and password, or that you provide an authentication string to allow you to go in here. It's not as simple as just passing that key. Now, if we actually look at this, so if I send this, right, I get my data back here, or maybe I don't, what's going on? There we go. So it gets this is a chart of accounts here. I get all kinds of data. You see it's multiple records coming back here with balances. Now, if we look here, Postman has separated out the special thing called authorization, which we'll also see in PowerShell. However, if we look at headers here, we'll see that authorization got created as a header. What it's actually doing is taking that username and password and creating this encrypted credential and passing that over to it, which is what we're actually going to do in PowerShell. You'll also notice when you look at the headers here, there are all kinds of other headers that get created. The key thing is that most of the time you don't really care about these headers, but you should know they're there. We'll look at some examples where that happens. So again, we've talked about parameters. We've seen this one authorization, which becomes a header. And then the body is just this stuff back here, which comes back, right? This is the body, which comes back as the JSON response to us. So we have our key pieces of a Postman, of an API, in this case in Postman. Now, one last example of an API that I want to show is, again, for Ultimate. Now, so in Business Central, they just want you to encrypt the username and password. In many APIs, that's not enough. So for example, in Ultimate, we have, back here, we have two APIs I have to run. The first time I run an API, again, I am passing an authorization of username and password, okay? And the only thing I'm getting back here when I send this, well, the body didn't give me very much here, right? It just told me who I was here. But if you'll notice here, you see I have 14 headers at the top, right? I have 16 headers at the bottom. This is another concept in APIs. It's called return headers. So the initial headers had the same authorization coming back here. The other things it's taken care of automatically. I haven't had to worry about those things here. All these things it's sending back and forth here. But the headers, there are two other headers that only exist in the return and not in the beginning, which you'll see here. You see this one here says JSession ID, and there's another one here, WMX forwarded. Because the way this works here is the company wants you to send an initial validation to get a session token back. These are these values, essentially a session token. And then you need those values to pass them back to run the next statement here. So how do I pass those values here? So in Postman, I can use this thing called tests. So it says I can set these global variables, and this is a little bit of JavaScript here. So I'm glad you actually seen JavaScript, but it's saying from the response header, which we had down here, for example, HCM, where is it? Let's go to the one we want here. JSession ID here. I am pushing that into a variable called JSession ID. Why is that valuable? Because then in my next API, where in this case, I do have parameters I'm passing here, in the headers, I pass those values back in the headers. So I have to run the API, one API once to get these values back. And then I need to use those same values to run the API, the actual API, which gets me my actual data. So in this case, you can actually see this is actually time data here, and you can actually see that come back. So in order to authenticate, I'm actually running the same, I run one API to authenticate, getting my values back in return headers, and I am passing them again in the next step. So this is kind of my basic overview of APIs. It starts with really simple ones, right? So you can get started with just working on very simple things like weather for one city here. But if you're actually working with business data, it's going to get more complex fairly quickly. So it's important to see these things like multiple steps, authentication, et cetera here. One thing that's useful before I leave Postman is that they have this nice little button over here. So if you've been practicing, and you can actually click code here, and you can specify, they even have PowerShell, REST method. It will show you that this is actual code that you could cut and paste right? Response equals invoke REST method. Here's the entire thing here. What you're sending here, the method is get. The headers are the headers I want here. The body is the body to return here. Everything comes back. And here, how the headers were created here all the way through. They don't put the authentication in this one, but you can actually get your code copied right out after you practice. It's really valuable in Postman. Now, I often don't copy things here because sometimes they give additional stuff that we don't really need, but that's just good to know.
Hey, Adam, that's a really, I didn't know that Postman did that. And I often use, go against the REST APIs for things like Stack Overflow. And I also do it for GitHub. And I actually, I don't use Postman in that way a lot. I do it all at PowerShell command line, but actually managing, because you have to you have to do exactly what you said. You have to do a login, you have to pass in authentication things, then you get back a token, and you have to do this little dance between Stack Overflow or GitHub. And this looks like it'll be super helpful just to get a sense of what you need to be passing back and forth, and then capture it in the basics of PowerShell.
Because now, and the things you should learn about, these variables are all set within the environment. You can do the environment levels. I'm not going to go into Postman in depth here, but you can actually see in my variables, not here. This is actually in the environment variables, which I need to find. Yeah, you see the environment variables. You can actually see what they are as they come through here. So Postman is real helpful for just testing this out here, because again, everyone is different. And when am I closing this? There we go. So yeah. And the code is nice, so it's really, really helpful when you're trying to work this out here. But I'm not as cool as you. I cannot possibly do invoke REST method from the command line and get it right. I just don't know how you do that from the command line and get that right. But God bless.
Lots of practice.
Yeah, but the thing is, I introduced myself that I want to get my data into SQL. That's my goal here.
Exactly.
So I've learned see, a large part of the reason I learned PowerShell is I said I'm not visual, so I don't like SSIS. Because I don't like mapping things with drawing and dragging and dropping. I hate that. So that's
good. Hey, we got a question in the chat room from Craig.
Yes.
And Craig asks, do those variables pass across somehow into the PowerShell code, or is that within Postman only?
Well, these are within Postman only. I mean, you see the code here that it's just putting the values into the code here. So you have to separate that out, and you have to go back to the code and redo it yourself here. So these variables are only it's not giving you, it's giving you the actual values here.
Yep.
So yeah, but good question, right? It'd be nice.
Definitely.
But see, nothing is perfect, right? We still got to do work. Okay, so now I've created all this stuff here. So I want to spend some time talking about JSON. So I've shown you that you got JSON coming out here, but what does that actually mean? So now I want to go to Notepad++. Fine. Okay, so I've actually saved each one of them here. So this one I haven't formatted. So this is what it comes back here, but there's no return characters or anything else. This is the weather guide. So in Notepad++ here, I've got two really nice plugins. I go to JS Tool, which I think I have to install. I think this came standard. I go to JS Format, and lo and behold, it formats it nicely. So that's really nice, okay? You can actually see things here, which is a good thing. Okay, the other thing it has, if I go to the plugin and I go to JS Tool and I go to JSON Viewer, it actually gives me a nice little, drop down over here, which is really useful when you have multiple amounts. So for example, in Business Central, right, we have multiple accounts here, and I say plugins, JSON Tool, JSON Viewer. Plugins, hold on, what do I do here? I can look at this here, and I can see that I have all my different values come in as objects in an array. Okay, so this was really, and we can see I have each one of them here. That's what the converted amount looks like here. These are the latest rates coming back here. These are accounts coming back here. So all pretty standard stuff here. So let's do 5 to 10 minutes on understanding basic JSON. Okay, so let's start with this guy here. So let me just go back here and kind of see this. There we go, refresh. Okay, so there are two things that you care about. And actually, I think I'm gonna do latest rates, it's easier. Let's do that one, easier. Yeah, okay. So if we look, what is JSON made up of? JSON is made up of objects that have name value pairs, and it can be hierarchical. So we have one master object here that has a name value pair called a name called success with the value of true, a timestamp, the base currency I'm using, the date and the value. And then I go one level deeper. It's another object that has 4 more value pairs here. The rate for Australian dollars, Canadian dollars, euros, and pound sterling. Okay, so anything with this bracket is an object which is essentially a name value pair. Sets of name value pairs. This should start reminding you of what you'll be able to do in PowerShell. If I look at Business Central, right? Well, let me do refresh here. You see, the other thing I care about here is this thing called an array. So an array is just a repeating of the same kind of object over and over again. So this array is called the value array. So each one of these guys here is a different object in that value array, 0 through whatever, 81. They all have, in this case, the same name value pairs. So as I look through it, I can see I have the number here, and I go down, I have the number again here. So it's just a repeating array of objects, each one having the same name value pairs. Okay, so the key things you care about, name value pair is an object, and then you have the array, which just repeats the same object over and over again. Now, you can do multiple levels of arrays also. If I look at this guy here, and I click refresh, I have a work summary, but also within each summary, I also have an array called work details, right? So here you'll see lots of different, the objects can have objects within it, you know, it's objects and objects. We have arrays in here. So you've got objects with arrays within them, but everything, an array is just a repeating of objects, and any other object is of name value pairs. So, you know, that's really the key thing you have to know about how JSON works here. It's not that hard to read. Again, the challenge with it is that everyone structures their JSON differently. So for example, you know, I looked at these latest rates here, and in my mind, I thought that rates should be an array, right? Which every array just repeating currency code and rate. That would make sense to me, right? But really, this is not an array. These are just every single thing. It's a different name and a different value for each kind of currency. So if you increase in this particular API, as you increase the number of currencies you're pulling back here, you're just getting more name value pairs. You're not just getting another value in an array. And you can ask who spent an hour not getting this right because he couldn't see that there's no actual bracket there to tell you this is an array, because I was convinced this should be an array. So yes, that's how you go. So we have name value pairs, we have arrays, and we have that data. Okay, we had from Postman the key pieces we wanted to put together. So now we're ready to go to PowerShell and actually run something. Okay. And now when we get to PowerShell, I'm sure there are many folks here who know more about, I know certainly Doug, and there's sure many of you otherwise, know more about PowerShell than I do. So let's just look at an example of what we're sending to PowerShell. This is.
That's okay, we won't hold it against you.
That's good, I hope. Well, there you go. So, you know, you'll make me stay in my apartment for months on end. Yes, what can we tell you? Anyway, so within this is obviously the simplest call we're going to do here. So I have the API, there's my access key, and I just wanted to know the rates for Australian dollars, Canadian dollars, euros, and GBP. So that's the same thing. I could just cut and paste this right out of Postman, okay? I have my method, it's called get. In this case, my type is application JSON. And in this case, I can just put these through here, URI, content type method, it wants the timeout also here. I run my invoke REST method, and I'm passing that to this object here. So even though it's coming back as JSON, PowerShell is actually putting that into a custom object. So if we look here, let me just do this here. I can see, I'm just going to comment that out, right? I'm running this here. If I run this, I get success, date. I'm seeing all my properties show up against the object I created here, right? I can, if I want, also just pipe that out for the rates who repeat itself here. Let me see if this one works. I can't remember what this was. Right, I can see it coming out into grid view. And this, by the way, proves to you that it's not an array, it's just multiple objects, multiple properties on the same thing, okay? By the way, you can also just loop through it here, right? And you can see all the values that come out of this. So we can do this, right? So again, this is really simple, and it shows me how I can access my data one piece at a time, okay? So, but that's really kind of the most trivial example of using this, because, you know, and you could do that and you could then pipe it into SQL, but I want to show you what I actually use.
Hey, Adam, go back to line 26. That's an advanced use of PowerShell. So that's really, if you want to touch on that a bit, where you're actually getting results and you're actually using the ps_object.members to pull out the names of the object. That's a really good technique. So
okay, so we can do that. You know, I don't know. Let's hope it works. That's
looks like it might work.
But then I have to say, I have to pipe this to something. It's not, let's see.
Okay, so there's a.
I just got to go and take this out. I did this for something else. I remember I may have to, so we just want, let's see if we make this work here. So we should do this, right? Results. And then I can just pipe, and let's just run that.
Yeah, just run it and see what comes up in the console about. Okay. Keep our fingers crossed.
There we go.
Awesome. So that's actually showing each property and all kinds of information about the properties on an object in PowerShell. That's something that's not only good with JSON, but it's also an excellent technique that you can use in PowerShell.
Because remember, even though, because what's happening is that PowerShell is taking that JSON and turning it into PowerShell for you, right? So you actually don't have, you know, you actually don't have, do I have this here? Yes. So let me just, you don't actually have JSON coming back from invoke web. It's getting that and interpreting it out that way. And I have here someplace, here we go. Stop that. And this is probably, I should have done this for the easy one here, but this is also, if you actually want to see what the JSON looks like,
yeah,
you can actually then take this here, right? And let's just say here, it should be, right? And we can just put this out here. That's just, so we don't confuse ourselves here. So I can actually do convert to JSON and put it back out to JSON. And it doesn't work. There's our test JSON file. Go. And if and you see I get JSON back this way. Now, I will say that this convert to JSON doesn't always work 100%. So
that is true.
So it works fine for this really simple example, but that's why I didn't want to just keep to the web examples, because they are pretty simple, right? And I wanted to show you more things again. I know that Doug says he's a NoSQL guy and MongoDB guy. I'm not. I'm a structured data guy, so I'm going to show you how to get the structured data here. So this guy here. So let's look at Business Central. A little more complex here. Is this Business Central? Am I looking at the right one here? No, I'm looking at, wait a minute. I clicked on the wrong one. There we go. Okay, so again, I'm going to change this password, and you should not put passwords in, you know, this is for examples only. You should not keep your passwords in plain text, okay? Yes. Okay, so the way I got this to work, and again, we take this, we convert this to a credential object, and then we take those properties of the credential object and pass that back to the header here. So again, remember we saw before when we use authorization, even though we started with a name and a password, it converted that to something else, and that's actually this base 64 string it's converting here, right? And we'll see that in this case, while I'm actually putting the authorization in the header, so I can go right here and say, I have the URI, or the headers I want, including my authorization here. The type is still application JSON. I've got my timeout here, and I run this, and I want to make sure. Let me just. I don't want to comment this out right now. Thank you. I don't want to put in database yet. So we can see here that if I run this, and what happened to, there we go. Because this isn't, because remember, this guy was actually an array. So therefore it could take each row and put it out. It had the same parameters across here. And we have this nice looking grid that doesn't look like JSON. It actually looks like an Excel spreadsheet or SQL data. By the way, if you have an API that's OData compliant, you can actually put this link here into your Excel, and Excel will bring back the data for you and put it into a spreadsheet for you. So that's also, you know, a lot of what I found with playing with APIs is finding ways to figure out the data, because, you know, trying to just do it in PowerShell is not the easiest all the time. If I can just put in Excel, dump it through, it's nice ways to look at things, okay? So now, this is what I promised about. I'm just doing my REST method, again, BC list, and again, the property of BC list called value, if you remember back, now, this was confusing. Value is not a special thing here. If I go back to, and I've lost my, yeah, if I go back here, remember that value was the name of the array, right? So that's why when I was in PowerShell, I can say bclist.value and type it out grid view. The reason, by the way, I have this on 2 lines is when I tried this on 1 line, it didn't work. I don't know why, or I was just not doing well that day. One thing I want to show you, and I promise you, is that once you have things in that nice rectangular grid, it's really easy to pipe that to SQL Server. So this is another command that you may not know called write SQL table data. So you can say, I put this to BC list value, I piped it out grid view, but I don't have to do that. I can instead pipe that to write SQL table data. So let's look at that. So write SQL table data just takes my schema name, my database name, my server instance, which is basically on my laptop, my table name, right? And if we look at SQL Server, I'm just going to prove to you, I'm just going to refresh this, right? I filtered this on the schema called demo, right? Demo. There's no table in here called BCGL accounts. So I put this little command in here. Here are my parameters I'm passing over to write SQL table data from the BC list, from a Business Central list value. I'm going to run this now, right? And lo and behold, whoops. Okay, if I refresh this here, I now have my data in SQL Server. So I can take that invoke web request, get all that data into a nice thing that I show in the grid view. And once I know that it's all nice and clean and looks like a table, I can put it back into SQL Server. And for those, and again, that's what, now this is where I get aggravated. I just spent all this time getting back to where I used to be before we upgraded to software as a service, right? So that's what life is today. But that shows you the value of that. One more example of a kind of more complex, see, in UltiPro, so watch UltiPro, and again, this, I will put the software on GitHub. The first thing I do is I use my credentials to run the first thing to get current. This is what gets those values back here. And this was the additional thing here. There's something called response headers. So while body gives you most of the data back here, response headers actually can pass individual values back to this variable here. So if we look at my parameters here, it says response headers variable is equal to response header variable because I am that original, right? So I get the values out of that, and I can then, no, I put the wrong place here. No, here's the response header. Where did I do this? What did I do? This worked. I want to make sure of something here. Because I do, here's something. No. So here I am invoking, let me try doing this right. Parameters 1. What did I do? Something got messed up. Oh, I guess it's using parameters 2 here. That's fine. So I do this here to get my parameters 2. And then it populates response header no, I'm doing something wrong here. Something got messed up here. Hold, excuse me for a second. Let me make sure this is right. So I am passing this out here, headers here. What happened to parameters 1? That's the problem. I cut and paste something and something doesn't make sense. Okay, so let's just fix this right now. Wait a minute. I know what I did. I know what I did. Okay, there we go. Whoops, I cut and paste and I screwed this up. Okay, so I had this variable called response. I am sending out to this URL to get my current value here with my basic authentication, right? It's populating this variable called response headers variable from that here. Then, actually, if I want to look here, I can just show you, just easier to say this way here. Let me just put this out here. So this is just the first part of this. So the first thing, all I did for this query, all I did for the first invoke REST method was to get these two things I needed called WFMBAT and JSession ID, which were the same variables I was using back in Postman. So let me just run this. Let's make sure this works. There we go. So it says it got these two crazy values back for me, right? So once I have those values back, then I have this next query to run. And my next query to run will get all that data back to me. So I have my next query here. And okay. Now, you'll see all I did is I added to the headers that I'm passing this response header value here. So I'm actually passing that back to the headers. I took the response headers I got from the first step and adding them back in here, and that adds to this thing called get work summary. Now, because we saw before that in this case, the data is multi-tiered here, I get for each work summary, right? And then I can go to each work detail. So I can essentially loop through and I can create. So I am taking multiple levels here. You'll see I take data from the work summary level and the work detail level because I can loop through in PowerShell my objects going through the work summaries first and then the work detail for each work summary. And I get all that data to create like a flattened out structure for me that I can actually put into here. So if I run this, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong here? Okay, I screwed something up here. Okay, so parameters 2, this should be response header. So why did this not work? So I have headers here coming through here, response headers here. Let's make sure, okay, this worked before. Okay, this is working, this is working, this is working. Headers, that worked, headers are there, authorization is there, headers are there, headers are there. And that worked, and this is not working, and I'm trying, let me just, I don't need that. Let me see if that works. This did work when I tested this through and I screwed something up here. And I don't know why. So let's see, I have headers working into here, headers. Because I added the headers up here, which is what I wanted to do. Authorization, that's fine. Because this guy is working. So why is this not working? Okay, in any case, I will make this work. I'm not sure why it's not working, but the point is you can, if we had that if we go back into here, we saw that we have work summaries, and under each work summary, there's the array for work summaries. We have our first work summary, and then within each work summary, we have work details. Right? And we can see that more easily over here. Here's the work summary, here's the object, here's the work details that roll up into that one. There are multiple objects in here, but then you go, here's the next work summary. So that works that way. I'm sorry, I can't quite immediately see why my code is not working. I will fix that before I put it up on the site. So, but the point of this again was to show you that you can start with the APIs, right? You should, let's go back into PowerPoint. Where's my PowerPoint? There we go. So my recap. So this should have been Postman. So we talked about parameters and variables on our API, authorization, looking through that. Oh, that's not what I want to look at. There we go, sorry. So we start with our API in Postman. You want to understand your JSON, the objects and the arrays here. You want to then build your invoke REST method, which you may have to do multiple times to get things back here. You can loop through your custom objects, and if you convert those objects into the right format, you can then write SQL table data and get your data back into SQL Server. So that's about an hour. That's my presentation. Are there any additional questions?
Yeah, that was great. So far, I don't see any questions in the chat. That was a really good walkthrough. Interesting how we have to go against data because of the structure of JSON and then transform it so that it can be put back into a relational table.
Yeah. So then the thing is, this data is sitting in SQL Server or some other database someplace.
Exactly.
So it goes into JSON. You take it from JSON, you put it back in. It's kind of aggravating, but that's what I'm saying. That's what we have to live with right now. And since for those of us who work with PowerShell, I will say I played around a little bit with Python, and sometimes there's some cool things you can do with that, but I'm not a Python programmer, so this is fine. And it's actually working pretty well. While my client tries to get Informatica working, at least this is working. So while they're trying to get Informatica to work. So
I have a question. Okay, so I have one question I have is, I'm sorry, somebody just said they can't find how to raise their hand in Zoom. And unfortunately, there you go. So
okay, Glenn Martin, what is your question?
Let me unmute Glenn.
There we go. I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So with JSON, there's no schema or no validation like there's in XML. So you might not be getting back the JSON you think you're getting back. I was just wondering if you had any try-catch kind of advice for how to, catch if you're expecting to dig into your JSON and then all of a sudden, what you expect to be there is just not there.
I have, well, you should, yes, these are demo things. You should use try-catch. I'll tell you that. You should do something. But my general rule is that when I do these things here, I get stuff into SQL. First of all, I'm not a big JSON guru, but there are ways that JSON does have schemas. There is a way of doing that. Most of the time it's not theirs, but I think it's not entirely, I believe it's possible. I haven't done it. I believe it's possible to do it that way. But I think, see, my general approach to these things here is I know the data I'm trying to get. When I'm working with the big guys, see, my general rule with is I get into SQL Server, I know how to write T-SQL, and I fix it, and I check the data there. That's generally, and that's just my methodology, because since, I know SQL well, the faster things get into SQL, the happier I am. Right, so then at that point in time, I go back and do validations and things with that. Now, again, the problem is it's a case-by-case basis because you just don't know what you're going to get. I mean, you hope that, most of the big software companies have been pretty good. The data actually seems to work, right?
Right.
But it's not like SQL, then the SQL is not corrupted, you're okay. So we've done about half a dozen of these right now. I've been okay with the data so far, so I don't have that much insight to share.
Right. One follow-up question real quick is, I agree that SSIS is evil. I was just wondering how you, what PowerShell tools you use to kind of negate the need for using SSIS.
Well, again, honestly, in most of my universes, we were dealing with SQL with linked servers and things like that. So we could honestly just do most of our work in T-SQL, right? So there was no need for it. In the new universe, when we have things like this stuff, we're just using, to me, that's what PowerShell is for. You can do almost everything you do in SSIS. And I'm not going to say I got away from that as quickly as possible, okay?
Yeah.
But, we do lots of things in PowerShell. That's, and then again, I'm a big person. I believe in kind of not, extract, transform, load. I'm more extract, load, transform, right?
Right.
I just want to put that data into SQL Server, and then I'll do what I have to do with it, right? So I don't want, therefore I can look at all my logic of transformation in SQL, which I understand well, as opposed to having it in a crazy mapping in SSIS or in SSIS packages, which has like lines just going everywhere.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'm very much, I'm an ELT guy. That's my preferred methodology. So therefore, I don't really do much that kind of transfer. And I don't deal with the volumes. If theoretically, SCS handles huge volumes of data well, but, I'm talking about, I deal with thousands of records a day, not millions, not billions. So this works fine. And one thing I do a lot of, because the other godforsaken thing I have to deal with is Excel. We get a lot of systems. We can't have an API. All we have is Excel. And that's how I found Doug's import Excel thing. I'll make a picture of import Excel. So with PowerShell, I import Excel like every single day. I use import Excel, kind of instead of doing this JSON thing, I do import Excel and do the exact same write SQL table data, and I'm good to go.
Right. And thanks for saying that, Adam, because I was going to actually tease you that I didn't see import Excel in your demo. So
well, I can show you. I do import it. I will say I use import Excel every day.
Excellent.
Because an API is like the good news. If I have like the best news, if they actually got me access to a SQL, that almost never happens. The next news, at least there's a document today. There's an API of some sort, right? That's good. That's better. The worst news is that, well, you can write an Excel. You can get an Excel spreadsheet extract. And if you've got issues with JSON with no schema, wait till you have Excel.
Exactly.
Okay. So
we have another question, a couple of questions. One question is, have you used DBA tools? It's a good product. Somebody at GTP asked that in the chat room. Have you used DBA tools from?
I have not, because I played around, because again, most of my, having listened about it in various podcasts, it seems to be more oriented toward people who are doing production, like keeping the database running. And
Gotcha.
I'm very much a person who's trying to get data shoved into something so I can actually get my data shoved in and work from there. Now, if DBA tools helps with that, it's something to look into. But a lot of that stuff seems to be provisioning things and watching backups and log shipping and all that good stuff. All of which I know. I can spell log shipping, right? And I can say replication, and that's about as far as I go with that.
Good.
So
yeah. Makes total sense. We have another question. Somebody raised their hand. Hang on. I don't know how to pronounce it. Ian or Ian?
Ian, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. I just had a quick question. Is there?
If you can speak up, that would be very helpful.
Oh, hold on.
Okay, closer to your mic.
One moment.
I think I say this like 4 times a day.
All right. Is this any better?
A little bit. Go ahead. I'll listen closely.
So I just wanted to understand if there's a way to query a SQL database using PowerShell with proper IntelliSense and all that. Because I haven't seen any, with DBA tools, you can write data, but there isn't a great tool out there to read the SQL database. Is that correct? Or
okay, well, that's a separate thing, but you can do, look, first of all, yes, you can't, I wouldn't develop SQL in PowerShell, right? So when I have to do things like extract data, there are two approaches I generally take. Number one is I write the extract in the stored procedure, so that all PowerShell is doing is called the stored procedure, right? Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of things you should know about getting data out of it. I'm not going to go digging right now, but what you should look at. Hold on, I'll just write these down, and then you guys, I'll put that here. If you want to read data, let's go back here. I just want to create a new. I'll just create a new file here. So, doesn't matter. Okay. So the first thing you want to do here is invoke SQL command, which you can put any SQL in that and work from there. You want to say read SQL table data and read SQL view data. Are also, so one thing I do is a quick thing here, read SQL view data will again push everything into a PowerShell thing, which you can then dump out that way. And so if you're able to get your data into a position where it works as a view, you can just do read SQL view data and dump it into something out that way, which I use quite a bit. I don't have an example right in front of me, and I don't want to get sidetracked, but these things are all good ways of getting data out of SQL in PowerShell.
Okay, and does IntelliSense work with this? Like I pinged a link on the Zoom chat, which has like the SQL CLI IntelliSense, and I was wondering if there's a way to is that doable, or is it too much?
I haven't done anything like that. And honestly, you know, I was gonna say, I'll put out, you know, you get the thing. I do things in SQL.
Mhm.
So if I can create the view here, let me just see if I can show this here. If I create the view, then once you have the view or the stored procedure, let me see if I have this here. Once you have the view of the stored procedure, there we go. Once you have the view or stored procedure, then you don't need to do very much in PowerShell, right? So let's go back. See here, watch this. Read SQL view data, read SQL parameters. That's it. You can just dump it out that way, and you're set to go.
Okay.
So I'm just saying this is as easy. You see, all I'm doing is saying, here's my database name, my view name, bingo, and I just do read SQL view and dump it into a thing. I'm set to go.
Okay, thanks.
So that's, you know, go ahead.
All right, so looks like a good stopping point, I think. Adam,
Okay.
thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I always like it when I learn a couple extra things, and when people use my modules is awesome.
There you go.
I don't see them in the presentation, that's fine.
Okay.
Everybody, thanks for dropping in tonight. And if you go to I posted my YouTube channel in the chat room. So if you want to head over to that, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And when this
Hold on.
recording becomes available, then I will, you'll get notified
Okay.
that it's pushed up there. Oh, great. I'm going to get to see
Yeah,
it.
I can tell you. So there it is. It's in, I can tell you, I use it. Here's it here. Excel brings it right in here. Here's the entire thing. Good to go. So now it's in the presentation. Okay.
Thank you. You get bonus points for that.
I get bonus points for that. I use it every day. There you go.
All right, sir. Again, appreciate it. And so at the end of this also, Adam, you'll send me the link to when you post all the code somewhere.
Yes, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll get that by tomorrow. That's
I'll
fine.
post that in those. No rush. And then when I post it up on YouTube, I'll put the link in the YouTube.
Right, and I will try to, yes. I just got to figure out why that last demo didn't work. I did pretty well till the very end.
That was great. I'm sure it was just a couple of hiccups.
Yeah, I know what I did. I was testing. I did a cut and paste at the very last minute, and cut and paste wrong is what I know. I know what I did. I know what I did. I
just before your presentation. I love it.
Well, whatever, you know, what can I tell you?
Oh,
okay, cool. Thanks all.
Thank you very much. Everybody have a good night. See you next month. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.